Hey guys, welcome. I'm Charlie from the Social Justice Collective.
And I'm Ben from the Business Collective.
And tonight we are doing our first collab with the Business Collective and the Social Justice Collective. Just before we get into it, let me just tell you a little bit about the Social Justice Collective. Maybe you're new and you're wondering what it's all about. Well, the Social Justice Collective offers opportunities for you to connect with other like-minded people who are passionate about furthering the cause of social justice, both locally and globally. We know that people in this field, and I am in this field myself, we're often at the heart of local communities, cutting across race, class, and gender divides. They're the ones reaching out to those out of reach, giving a voice to the voiceless, and helping those who need it most. So this collective is made up of people in all different spheres. Some work in the voluntary sector, some work in government, some run a social enterprise or play a key role in social justice within their particular industry. But wherever you or however you slot into this, we believe that by coming together regularly, by sharing ideas and networking and connecting through collaborative action, we really actually believe that we'll be able to further the cause of social justice, both locally and globally. So that's who we are. Ben, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about the Business Collective.
Yeah, so the Business Collective is designed to help bring together entrepreneurs but really focus on you as an individual. You know, so often in business, we think about a company and that side of things, but we always forget about you and what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You're the top of this pyramid. You're often that, so it's a very lonely position to be in. So the whole point of the Business Collective is to really invest in you, to help you meet other like-minded people, to learn and also to grow in your position and also in your faith. So tonight, one of the big things we really wanted to get across during this collaboration was really thinking about how us as entrepreneurs can do something differently when it comes to thinking about social justice initiatives. You know, when we think about it at the moment, we often think about the PR opportunity, but there's so much more to that. And Charlie, maybe you want to give a few suggestions for us as entrepreneurs and what we can do.
Yeah, I love that, because you're right. I think sometimes when we think of businesses collaborating with social justice initiatives, it does become part of their marketing and it does become a PR opportunity. But actually, there's so many ways businesses can collaborate with social justice initiatives on a much deeper level, doing a lot more. And so whether that is, you know, partnering with a charity on the ground and actually helping them to outwork what they're doing, so that might be by funding it. But it's also more than that when you're combining with social justice initiatives. It's looking at things like your supply chain. It's looking at things like your diversity and equality policies and what that looks like within your teams. I think it's to do with fair pay and equal rights for all employees and just all that sort of thing. There's so much more when it comes to businesses collaborating with social justice initiatives. So those are just some of the things that you can look out for, but I really encourage like businesses, entrepreneurs to look at what they can do. And especially when it comes to things like looking at who's on the ground. Maybe as a business and an entrepreneur, you're passionate about a certain topic, a certain initiative, a certain cause. Find the ones that are actually on root level on the ground and see how you can support them in outworking what they do.
Perfect, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Well, I'm really excited tonight, Ben, because we actually have Mal Fletcher, who's going to be sharing with us. Mal is a good friend of the church. He's been around for a long time. I personally know and love Mal. Every time I hear him speak, I'm always inspired, I'm encouraged, and I'm actually really challenged. It makes me want to do better, be better. If you don't know Mal, he's actually the founder and chairman of 2030 Plus. He's a respected keynote speaker, social commentator, and social futurist, author and broadcaster based in London. So we are super grateful and really privileged to have you here today, Mal. Over to you.
Well, thank you guys, and welcome to all my good friends at the Social Justice and Business Collectives. I want to thank Charlie and Ben for the kind invitation to talk to you tonight. I want to speak to you all tonight on Influence Skills 2030. And this subject becomes especially relevant in times like these, times of unusual challenge and change, because it's at times like these we have to decide whether we will influence the situation around us more than it influences us. It's very important that we see ourselves as positive change agents in this time, because today's environment, we're seeing pressures where culture is struggling with things like trust. For the past 10 to 15 years, every major category of public institution in this country has experienced a major public trust deficit, from business and banking to the police and the courts to mass media and entertainment, to big tech and science. Even the church has been affected. Every class, a foundational institution, has been subjected to a higher than normal level of scrutiny and at times found wanting. We're also struggling with the issue of autonomy, human autonomy in the age of automation. The push toward automation in Industry 4 is raising important questions about privacy, about jobs, about the impact of technology on cognitive ability. In the next 20 years, we expect 800 million jobs to be automated worldwide, including some 35% of British jobs. Now, it is true that new technologies open up new types of work, but the question this time will be whether we can transition quickly enough to take advantage of not just new jobs, but entirely new livelihoods. And we're facing pressure with transition. Transition in forms of the energy we use, the effects of increasing globalization and urbanization, transition in terms of social cohesion, particularly the opening up of new opportunity gaps in our society. But there are certain skills that will help you and I move people and problems forward in a positive, healthy, and innovative direction. One of the most important of those skills is the pursuit of visibility, especially if you're a leader. Tough times, in terms of both financial and social economies, are not the time for the leader that only descends from the mountain when she or he has something heavy to say. It's been said that you're only a leader when you can take the tough calls. But I think you have to take the tough calls and be seen to share the tough conditions that are the result of those calls. Leadership begins with identification. If you've seen the movie Darkest Hour, you'll remember the reference to Churchill's famous speech, "We shall fight in the beaches, we shall fight in the landing fields, we shall fight in the trenches, we shall never surrender." But what most people don't realize is that few lines, those 4 lines, are just the last part of a very long speech given in the House of Commons on June the 4th, 1940. And we remember that section because the "we shall" is repeated 10 times in just 4 sentences. That's the power of inclusiveness. Another important skill relates to vision casting. In tough times, the temptation for leaders is to micromanage, to acutely focus in on really closely defined problems. But the people who are working with you in your team are looking for something other than that. They're looking for you to provide the power of context, the big picture narrative into which they can plug their lives, through which they can define who they are and why they matter, and why the future will be brighter because of their work. If people don't feel important, they will feel impotent. So this is a good time to retell the story of the collective, the company, the organization, the third sector group, the charity, the enterprise that you're involved with, putting current challenges into perspective for people so that folks know not just what we do here in this group, but what we stand for. And having done that, we need to draw sight lines connecting individual work roles with the overall vision. So drawing a line of sight between daily individual labor and long-term collective goals. Teams need to know right now how their work makes a difference by adding value to human lives. Because without that sort of vision casting, we're constantly devising better systems to take us absolutely nowhere. Another important skill is the ability to be conviction-driven in your work and your leadership. Whatever you're doing, whenever you're talking to a group, your feelings of conviction are the dominant message people receive. And the future isn't shaped by technologies and events alone. It's shaped by human responses to technologies and events. And they're partly driven by emotion. There's no change in life without emotion. After 9/11 in New York City, the air travel industry in the US basically broke down for months on end to the point where airlines were filing for Chapter 11 status. Building industry also broke down in America, especially the building of grand, large, tall buildings. The reason was not simply the work of terrorists, it's that human beings made an emotional response to the tragedy. There's also no learning without emotion. Anyone that's listening to this has been involved in education knows about Hebbian learning, which is where we learn more when our ideas are linked with emotional circuits in the brain. So if you're having fun while you're learning, you'll learn better. In tough times, there's no point behaving as if feelings don't count. They do. A lot is said about passion today, but passion is really just controlled conviction. And you can increase your passion. You can increase the impact of your conviction on others using what's commonly known as the 80-20 rule, but it's mathematically called the principle of factor sparsity. It was devised by a man called Vilfredo Pareto in 1906. He was an Italian statistician who noticed that 80% of land in his homeland was owned by 20% of the population. And over a number of years, he began to see a correlation in that same ratio within economies, within community organizations. And today, most people in retail will accept that 80% of custom comes from about 20% of the customers. In the third sector world, 80% of work is done by pretty much 20% of the workers or volunteers. But I think there's an important personal element to this too. 80% of your effectiveness comes from things that take 20% of your time and energy, because those things are a reflection of your convictions and your gifts. So the question is, what activities bring about the 80% of your effectiveness? If you concentrate more time and energy on those 20% things that bring 80% effectiveness, your productivity multiplies, your passion and conviction multiplies too, and you're able to better motivate your team. Another essential influence skill related somewhat to this is civic focus. Many companies and organizations are now developing a keen interest in return on community. Until relatively recently, the major way companies measured their effectiveness was return on investment. Now, success is also being measured by the impact a company has on community well-being. And I think traditional CSR, or corporate social responsibility, is dying because people no longer want to work for companies in which community service just sits on the periphery of the corporate strategy. They want to work for companies where community well-being is somewhere right in the core of the decision-making process. They want to know they're working for something that makes a difference beyond the corporate front door. This brings us naturally to another important skill set, which involves or revolves around a common good worldview. Your ability to inspire and influence the lives of others sits in direct proportion to the trust you inspire in them. In any sector or project, trust is a product of your experience, knowing what you're doing, plus your integrity, being who you claim to be, multiplied by your commitment to the common good. So to grow in influence, you can increase your experience through study and practice, for example. You can boost your integrity by learning to make wise and righteous decisions. But you'll see an even more multiplied effect if you add to all of that your commitment to the common good. Now, if you've seen the movie Invictus, you know that on becoming president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela made it absolutely clear that he wouldn't merely be the president of the nation's downtrodden blacks, nor would he be the president of the unfortunately called coloured South Africans. He said he was the president of all South Africa, not just those who shared the apartheid experience or saw things the way he did. And that's what we call a common good worldview, a commitment to innovation for the benefit of everybody, even those who don't like you very much and those who don't listen to you. I've often said to civic and business leaders around the world, the most urgent question any leader of any organization in any sector can ask is this: what kind of city or nation do I want to live in 10 years from now? And what can I do to set that in motion? What can I do with my resources and my position, with my team, to set that bigger picture vision of the city into process? And you know, answering that question will help you motivate yourself. It's very hard to stay motivated for long periods if your vision only extends as far as completing a specific project. What you do needs to pass what I call the get out of bed test. Is this work worthy of the investment of not just my working hours, but my life? We also need to see the importance of civility when it comes to influence. One of the problems with the cloud today is the propensity it has to encourage what is called cognitive bias. Now, I've just done a whole series of BBC interviews on this in the past few weeks. Some of them are on our website. The internet provides echo chambers, doesn't it, in which people can have all of their biases confirmed and all of their prejudices encouraged. And that gives rise to what I've come to call the hot response culture, where people actually prefer hyper-emotional responses over calm, well-reasoned ones. And that's actually changing the way our brains work, according to neuroscientists. But it's also encouraging us to default towards judgmentalism. And that stifles true social innovation and activism. Why? Because as former President Barack Obama said in his annual conference last year, to create lasting change, you have to be willing to work with people who don't agree with you. So he said, pointing out the flaws in other people's views is easy, but working constructively with those people for a higher good is much tougher. And yet that's how change really works. We're talking about skills that will help you increase your influence in leadership and life. And one very important skill is the ability to show poise, especially in any leadership role. On August 28, 1963, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. turned one speech at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington into a seminal moment in American and world history. His impassioned speech called upon America to live up to the promise of its creed, as he put it, which guarantees, he said, equality to people of all races. He imagined a nation in which, as he put it, little black boys and little white boys could join hands together around the table of brotherhood. Now, if you're watching today in those old TV news reels on YouTube and so on, it's pretty easy to forget that this man was only 34 years of age when he gave that momentous speech. And yet there was an air of authority, of controlled conviction, of quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. It was a quality that stood out partly because of the insecurity all around him. People in times like these, in the COVID season and even in the post-vaccine period, need reassurance. They need a fixed point of reference in a storm of change, and you can be part of that landmark. Part of influential leadership is learning to map and deal with your anxieties. You will feel anxious in difficult times. That's normal. But you need to be able to perhaps keep a ledger, asking yourself, how is this situation affecting me? Write it down. How is it affecting you? Write it in the first person. I feel this way because of X. And then flip the thing around so that you become your own counselor. Imagine you're talking to a trusted counselor. What are they saying to that situation? What would they be encouraging you to do? You can do the same in managing the anxiety of other people or helping them to manage it. Sometimes just writing something down or verbalizing it, articulating it, goes a long way towards helping you deal with it. Sigmund Freud said there are three core reasons for human anxiety. One is our failing bodies, the power of disease. The second is nature's power, the power of disasters. And the third is social aggravation. We can actually talk ourselves into a state of fear over the water cooler at work or the dinner table at home. So in the organization you happen to be involved with, if you're leading at any level, do an inventory of language that's used. Language is a key shaper and reinforcer of culture. That's why anthropologists spend so much time seeking to decipher languages. Remove the negative, pejorative phrases. Substitute confusing terms with concise words and phrases. Watch your body language when you're in front of people. Psychologists talk about anchoring, where our verbal signals are wrapped in strong non-verbal signals. And usually it's the non-verbal that people pick up the most. And keep a sense of perspective. Fear tends to feed on disproportion. I say that everything is the end of the world until it actually isn't. And that's the kind of situation we're living in at the moment. Also central to increasing your influence is the ability to be articulate. There are just three rules in leading anything in a time of crisis. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Without proper communication, without getting the right information to the right people quickly enough, productivity slows down for everybody. So make sure you tell your team everything you can about where the organization is headed. Describe where it is right now, what challenges it faces. Don't give people platitudes in place of accurate information. Explain what the team can do to help you achieve the goals in spite of the challenges. I love listening to John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech as president in the early 60s. He spoke to America at the height of the Cold War. It was a time of great insecurity for the nation. They were afraid of the Soviet Union externally and afraid of the internal impacts of communism. But JFK helped to allay the fears of the people, to distract them for a while from their anxieties by giving them a clear role in producing change. He didn't deny the challenges, but he gave people a positive role to change it. He said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask instead what you can do for your country. And he backed it up with actions by giving America what he called the Peace Corps, where young people could go overseas for a year at a time with some government support, and they could live out American values through projects in especially the third world. Open up your decision-making in difficult times as much as you practically can. You can't open up all decision-making because leadership is sometimes about making a unilateral decision. You have to make it on your own. The buck stops with you. But you can at least provide an explanation and help people negotiate the change that's coming. I have one last but hugely important skill for you tonight, and that's what I call future casting. Now just think for a moment. The world's most influential people in any sector, the people shaping our cultural conversation, are not Luddites. They're not in love with the past. They're not existentialists, just managing the present. All of them, without exception in any field, are thinking the future all the time. They're choosing from a variety of possible futures, the one version of the future that they think best fits them and where they want people to go. So influence isn't primarily about celebrating the past or even managing the present. It's about engaging the future. If we don't engage the future, if we don't invent the future, someone else's vision of the future will reinvent us. And engaging with the future is about a lot more, ladies and gentlemen, than simply identifying trends. Everybody wants to try and identify trends as if that's the answer to something. You have to be able to marry the impact of the trends with what customers or clients will actually want as a result of those trends. What is that shift likely to do in the attitudes of people, in the behavior of people, in the aspirations of people? And how can I get ahead of that need with some sort of answer? That's where influence really lies. In practical terms, future casting involves mapping worst case scenarios with your team. From time to time, just asking the question, what's the worst thing that could happen to this project right now? And if that happened tomorrow, what could we do? What would be our next move? To ask questions like, what are factors that could lead up to that worst case scenario? Which of those are within our control? And how can we make them less likely? You think, well, talking like that just sows discord and sows discouragement. Actually, it doesn't if it's done well from time to time. It doesn't dampen enthusiasm. If done properly, it inspires confidence because it demonstrates that you're willing to get ahead of the change curve, which is where real influence lies. But the major emphasis in all of that has to be producing hope. I've often been told by leaders in different settings, hope is not a strategy, but my response is always the same. Yes, but at least it puts you in the frame of mind to develop a strategy. And there's one aspect of future casting I need to share today because it's especially relevant in the face of the current pandemic and the impact of these lockdowns. Navigating future engagement is very important. And at the moment, one of the areas we have to really speak to sometimes is this area of conspiracy theory. And this will be even more true as we move into the vaccine period. Conspiracy theories abound today, as they often do in history, in times of large scale and largely unexpected crises. And they are attractive, I'll grant you that, because they appear to offer a convenient catch-all narrative to explain what's pretty difficult to understand or accept. And in the moment, they can be very difficult to disprove without some level of special knowledge or expertise. And they also give to the person spreading the theory a special kudos for having, quote, hidden knowledge. Conspiracy theories are usually identified by certain things. First of all, they offer one explanation for multiple, often unrelated events. While bona fide conspiracies do happen in history and they have played their part, conspiracy theories very often, not always, try to explain several unrelated events as the result of just one overriding conspiracy by one group of people. They're also often founded on the idea that some mysterious group has a malevolent intent towards society and the desire and the capacity to bend events and people to their own will. So if you hear someone saying something like, you know, if the following happens, they've got you, expect to hear a conspiracy theory. Most conspiracy theory pundits never get around to really explaining who they are in any reasonable detail. And conspiracy theories are also marked by circular arguments that are consistent only within themselves. That's why social media becomes an echo chamber. Conspiracy theories don't usually do well under any cross-examination that calls upon facts from outside their own accepted frame of reference. Now, dealing with the dangers of conspiracy theories, you need to know they're great time wasters. You know, you can be distracted from investigating more plausible reasons for some event or emergency. They also attribute expertise to people who haven't necessarily earned that status. They can distract people from vital information that could help avert disaster and help us solve the problem. Just a few years ago, rumors about Ebola, that eating bitter melon can help you escape the Ebola virus, caused many people to avoid vaccinations, which helped spread the disease in Africa. And conspiracy theories prevent a faith-filled approach to problems. Faith is always about, one, the promises God has made, and two, the real life situations faith has to address. See, being willfully ill-informed doesn't help the cause of faith. It leads us down a path to fantasy. We can't be proactive or faith motivated and reactive at the same time. We have to choose. There's a lot more we could say on that, but maybe some other time we could do an interview on that. The important thing here today, the takeaway, is that we're moving very quickly toward an innovation age, which is unprecedented in its scope, opportunities, and challenges. And you, ladies and gentlemen, have the opportunity to craft not only a life, but an entire career of influence through leadership that is visible, especially in tough times, visionary, casting a vision of the preferred future, poised, able to make people feel confident in their ability in the present, articulate, civic focused, future casting, and based on a common good worldview. And as I wrap up, let me just remind you that you can get access to me and to all of the resources we publish at 2030 Plus on social media and our website. On social media, it's Twitter at Mal Fletcher. Remember, it's M-A-L, not M-E-L. Instagram, the same, at Mal Fletcher. LinkedIn, just my name. YouTube.com/Mal Fletcher. And our main website, which is going through a great new behind the scenes redesign at the moment, is 2030plus.com, which is where you'll find all sorts of articles on leadership and social change, and most of my BBC and other media interviews. Okay, thanks for listening. It's back to you guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Mal. That was amazing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mal. Loved that. Super inspired after hearing that.
I think the key thing you can really get across on that is communicating in the time of crisis. It's something I think all of us, everyone in a social justice collective or business collective, we can really think about how can we do things differently during this time of change. Thank you so much for coming along to the event. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'd love to see you both connect with each other, across the collectives, but also at our next event.
Take care. Bye.